You are about to see the worst half hour of television ever.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Is ASMR still like a thing? Is it? I don't know. So what's the biggest problem in American comic book culture? And no, it isn't race swapping or a gay Superman or shitty movie adaptations or mid-level TV shows. It's one thing and one thing only: you, the consumer, and your lack of appreciation for the culture for what it is, and your lack of ability to grow and adapt with the culture. For some weird reason, especially with older comic book fans, have this idea that comics were so much better in the 80s and the 90s. You know, that generic buff dude superhero beating the brakes off the generic villain while saving the generic baddie was the bee's knees. Peak fiction, am I right? Have you seen all the shit that came out of the Image camp? The Spider-Man clone saga, that one time they turned Captain America into a werewolf. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was kind of cool. That was like one of the first comic books I bought when I was in 5th grade from the flea market, but you know, your mileage may vary. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely great stories and characters that came out at the time, like Batman Year One, some early Spawn, The Watchmen, Savage Dragon, Weapon X, and pretty much anything that Frank Miller or Garth Ennis touched. But those were the cream of the crop. There were so many crappy, forgotten, generic comics that came out back in the day that have permanent real estate in the dollar bin. With that being said, today's comics aren't that much better, but they aren't that much worse either. So many great stories are coming out now. Way more diverse stories. So many great comics that have nothing to do with superheroes in general. But for some reason, the curators of our culture, specifically those dudes on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, tend to focus on how woke culture is tearing down and ruining comics instead of bringing up the stories that they love that are coming out. Probably because A, these guys are grifters who don't even care about comic book culture, but are here to just get a rise out of the fans in the culture, to get clicks and views on their videos or posts or whatever. Or B, they're just reading clickbait headlines of these articles, not even reading the articles or even reading the comics that they're critiquing or hating on, and then going on YouTube and making hour-long rants about how they hate that April O'Neil is a black girl in the TMNT movie without even actually watching the movie. It's mind-blowing, man. It's the internet, right? Crazy. And this isn't just a thing that's happening in comic culture. This also happens in hip-hop, movies, TV shows, and such. A lot of unnecessary and bad faith criticism from people who really aren't even engaged in the media that they're bashing. So why focus on the things you hate about the industry or the culture? Why not just big up the things you love about the industry, the stories you love and you're engaging with actually? It comes down to one word.
Fat burger! Yes!
No, not that word. This word, nostalgia. And truthfully, it's a little deeper than that. You know, a little bit of racism, a little bit of homophobia, misogyny, transphobia, and other phobias, but I'm gonna keep it light in this video. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of all that type of stuff and just keep it comic book light, you know. It's a kid's channel, right? Right? Stop letting nostalgia ruin your taste. Nostalgia, you know, that feeling you get when you reminisce on a TV show, cartoon, and movie that you loved as a child. And every time you see anything related to that TV show, cartoon, and movie, you get this fuzzy, warm feeling inside, even though that TV show, cartoon, or movie probably isn't as good as you remember. A lot of these old heads let this feeling dictate their taste in comics. They never actually are reading these new comics and just shitting on them at first glance. Reading those clickbait headlines and not actually reading the comic book. And don't give me that argument that, oh, I don't need to read it to understand that it's shitty. I don't need to watch the show to know that it's shitty. If you stab yourself in the eye, you know that it's gonna hurt. So I don't need to like blah, 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 blah. It's stupid. But why talk about it if you don't like it? This level of thinking, in my opinion, is ruining the comic book culture, the comic book industry, the love of comics that we all have. But clearly you don't if you're just shitting on it at all times. Who wakes up and just hates on stuff?
Or you think it's cool to hate things. And it's not. It's boring. Talk about what you love and keep quiet about what you don't.
With this mindset, you are isolating new readers from coming into comics and trying to find something new and interesting to read. Some of the consumers might feel pressured to pick up a comic that they might not be interested in, or be deterred from reading a certain series because all they see is hate online for that comic, even though most of the people who are criticizing the book haven't read it. These older readers need to understand that this is a new day and age, and we should be guiding new readers to great comics and not shitting on them. Most of you glorify the old days when there hasn't been a great superhero comic since the 60s, with the exception of Invincible, but that's another story for a different video. Be on the lookout for that one. So now let's talk about Marvel, DC, and the superhero genre in general. I don't understand why people completely omit the small publishers when it comes to comics and only speak about Marvel and DC. I know they hold a majority stake in the market of comic sales, but they are not the end-all be-all comic. Small publishers like Image, Mad Cave, Dark Horse, and so many other small publishers have put out great comics in the past 5 years or so, but the books they put out seem to be left out of the conversation. Here's a word to the wise for comic book consumers: let superheroes go. Comics are so much bigger than dudes in spandex and with capes. There's horror comics, mystery comics, sci-fi comics, slice of life comics, and so many other different genres that you could easily get into without actually having to look at another Spider-Man or Superman or Batman. We need to let these superheroes go. These characters have been used and abused by the big two, kind of like your mom. All of them being killed off and brought back and cloned and changing of the mantles, having sidekicks added, sidekicks killed, and so much more. And I can see why the bastardization of these beloved figures created a disgruntled fanboy, but we need to stop investing too much stock into these hero characters. We need to start treating them like folklore, Greek gods, some sort of mythological beings whose stories are endless and never in sync or in order or ending. That way, you won't be too upset when they change the characters up. There's a Superman for everybody, right? And that's the great thing about these superhero characters and kind of the bad thing about them, right? There's a Superman for a person who grew up in the 80s. There's a person who grew up in the 90s, and there's in the 2010s and the 2000s, right? And we need to take that in consideration, that these characters are just abstract beings beyond a chronological story. If you don't put too much stake into these characters, you won't be upset when their mythos gets changed up, because their mythos is everlasting and ever changing. Whenever they do bring a Gwen Stacy back, even though that's a vital part of Peter Parker's story, if you look at it like there's Peter A and there's Peter B, there's my Peter and there's your Peter and his Peter and their Peter, Peter Pan, you won't be mad. But to wrap my thoughts up on this whole thing, we as fans should just appreciate that we're still even getting comics, that these comics are becoming movies, TV shows, and video games. And I mean, just think about it. 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have none of this. People who were in love with comics back in the day were getting bullied, shoved into lockers, or whatever have you. We should be appreciative that comics have become part of the mainstream and pop culture, and that you're not being bogarted for liking these comics, for liking these superheroes, for liking these things. And we shouldn't divide ourselves in this culture because we like older comics, or we like this type of comic, or we don't want to see this group of people being put into comics. We should appreciate it for what it is, and we should love it, and we should big it up, or else it's just gonna die down a window. And who would have ever thought we would ever get a movie like Endgame or Into the Spider-Verse? I mean, I sure as hell didn't. 20 years ago I was like 5. At the end of the day, you should just do what your parents should have taught you. If you have nothing nice to say, then shut the fuck up forever. No, I'm playing. We just gotta do better, man. The comic book culture just needs to do better. We can only do that if we bring positive energy to the industry, to the community, and whatever. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. If you can, donate to my coffee shop so I can keep making these videos. I'm a comic book creator. Check the link in the description. Read my comic for free. Bam, The Last Hero on Earth. I appreciate all the love and support I've been getting on my last couple videos. Yeah, that's it. Love you guys. Peace.
Worst ending ever.